Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the news this week that despite basically allowing almost any meat products into the British market from Australia via our shiny new post-Brexit trade deal, the same was not really reciprocated the other way. It's supposed to be, not in practice. In fact, although Australia has increased their exports of beef to the UK by 1,700 tonnes, taking full advantage, the UK in return has not been able to export a single sausage. And maybe this is why Australian newsreaders were laughing uncontrollably when they read of the UK-Australia trade deal when it was agreed. It was a brilliant deal for Australia. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So another point to the experts, they tried to warn us about the realities of trade negotiations, yet people chose to believe the snake oil salesman. When we left the EU, Boris Johnson wanted to move quickly in order to secure trade deals with major economies as quickly as possible. Brexiteers had promised immediate returns on leaving the EU. In fact, they promised that we'd have all of our post-Brexit trade deals with the world's largest economies ready to go from day one of Brexit. Obviously, this did not occur because how could that even work? How do you agree a trade deal with, say, Australia, for example, before you've even agreed your own trading environment after leaving the EU? We had to leave the EU first, of course, and agree some general terms before any other third country could possibly know what the lay of the land was. So once we did leave the EU, it was all hands to the pumps to get these trade deals rolling in. Boris Johnson had promised them really quickly. The government began by boasting of carryover deals. These are basically EU trade deals that other countries allowed us to copy over. Despite the fact that the Daily Express is always including these in their reports on Brexit trade deals, most people know they're not real. So Johnson needed some real ones. The problem, however, was political reality. For every country that we wanted trade talks with knew that we were going to be desperate for a quick agreement. But trade negotiations take years, and that is because each side is trying to open up as much of the other market as they can, but concede as little of their own market access as possible. So both sides, they begin with the list of things they want, and then there's this like slow, painful process of inching very, very slowly towards one another. Not too quickly, you don't want to give too much away in any one go, until you are both happy with the position you find yourself in, and it'll be between those two starting positions. And it will come as no surprise to anyone capable of critical thought, that this final position will be rather closer to what the larger market wanted than the smaller market. Hence, our trade and cooperation agreement with the EU is a thing of beauty if you're in the EU, and gives the UK very little. It's also why it will be difficult for a Labour government to negotiate large aspects of it like they say they want to. It's not impossible. We have some bargaining chips, but as the agreement is basically what the EU wanted, they're not really going to be all that happy to change a lot of it. But the Australia deal sort of bucked this trend, because here the smaller market got exactly what they wanted. They even got away with pulling a fast one at the end. The deal had basically been agreed in principle. Boris Johnson was talking about how we could get all these Tim Tams, which are basically, as I still understand it, penguins without jokes. And then the Australian government went, oh, hang on a minute, we're not sure about this now. What do you mean we're not sure? We've just agreed it. Yeah, we're not really happy with these environmental standards. If you'd like to drop them there, I'm sure we can see a way through. So they were basically giving the impression that we're going to walk away unless Boris Johnson agreed to sacrifice environmental standards as well, something he'd previously promised not to do. Well, given that he'd already announced that the deal was in the bag and now Australia were looking like walking away, he naturally gave them everything they asked for, to the annoyance of the British negotiating team. And so we ended up giving a much smaller market huge access to our own market in return for not really a great deal into their own. And we lowered our standards in doing so. Boris Johnson and Liz Truss boasted of their new free trade agreement with reduced tariffs in a number of areas, but tariffs are just one trade barrier and they're not usually the most serious one. A far more serious trade barrier is standards, because if you do not meet those, you're not trading anything. And Australia uses these to block an awful lot of imports in economically and politically important areas, like, for example, agriculture. And this is what we're discovering now. We have allowed Australia much greater access into our food market. Unusually, for the larger market, we have opened up way more to the smaller market than we got in return in practical terms. And this is not how trade talk maths is supposed to work. But Australian trade negotiators are very good at what they do. They are famous for punching above their weight, even with sensible countries, getting exactly what they wanted for almost nothing in return, with a Brexit government must have been child's play for them. And this latest news is that Australia has been able to increase its beef exports to Britain by 1,700 tonnes since the deal came into force. Now ask yourself, how was this made possible? It was in part down to lowering our standards. However, in return, we've not exported so much as a beef sausage extra in the opposite direction. Why? Because Australian standards controls are not allowing it. Nothing to do with tariffs. Entirely down to non-tariff barriers that Boris Johnson kept downplaying in our post-Brexit trading environment. It's not that the Australia trade deal doesn't allow us to export beef products to Australia. It's just that their standards bureaucracy is like an impenetrable forest of red tape. It's been reported by National World that it would take about 3 years to go through the process of form filling to have your exports approved for access to the Australian market, whereas we were letting in Australian produce almost straight away. So what's been happening is an exporter has essentially tried. Mostly they weren't even trying because, trying to sell high quality beef, because we still have high production standards, remember. We've only lowered our standards for the market, not our production standards. So high quality beef products being shipped to the other side of the world, it's like, that's not really a sensible business, is it? But we apparently tried to ship something recently and found all manner of red tape blocking the way. Either the UK government didn't consider the practicalities of using the trade deal for the benefit of British exporters, or they just didn't care. Which brings up quite an important point. The UK government's own economic impact assessment of the UK-Australia Free Trade Agreement estimated that it would boost GDP by 0.08% by 2035. So we basically had to wait about 15 years and it will boost it by 0.08%, which, if it's not obvious, is worthless. The Chancellor gave away 10 times that amount in tax cuts just this month as a pre-election bribe that didn't actually win him a single vote. But even this basically zero figure was arrived at by assuming that British exporters would be able to take advantage of improvements in access to the Australian market. But British exporters are finding it's not that easy. Now, if it's going to take 3 years typically of form filling to be able to export a sausage to Australia, how many businesses are realistically going to find that worthwhile? So the economic impact assessed boost to our GDP was already worthless. And it may actually have been hopelessly optimistic when you take account of the practical ways that we can actually use this trade deal. It's why we should always caution Brexiteers when they're trying to sell the benefits of these Brexit trade deals, when they blindly repeat the hype from ministers. Today, in the wake of this news, they're all going, oh, but look, our exports to Australia were boosted after the trade deal, and they're boasting these huge percentages. Well, they're not huge percentages, significant percentages. And you think, yeah, but that significant percentage still represents a really small amount of money compared with what we've lost since Brexit. But also, you're not taking into account the very high inflation we've had in the last year. So in actual fact, if you were to take inflation into account, our exports, have they been boosted much at all? No, they haven't. The reality is never as good as the trailer. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.